going on, guys? So today we're continuing off our Star Wars reviews with The Empire Strikes Back. So this film's considered to be the perfect sequel because not only does it advance the story even further, but the main characters are further developed in this movie. But I can see why people love it so much, and I enjoy it just as the other films. So just as I did with the previous review, I'm going to give a brief summary of the film, then I will talk about the things that I liked and found interesting, then about the things that I really didn't really like. But again, it's not a lot because, hello, it's Star Wars. So let's get started. So the film picks up about 3 years after the end of A New Hope, and a lot has changed since then. Luke, Han, and Chewie are now fully fledged members of the Rebellion. The rebels are no longer stationed on Yavin 4, they moved their base onto the ice planet of Hoth. And ever since Darth Vader felt the Force within Luke at the end of A New Hope, and also briefly encountering him in a comic book story, which is canon, he's been after him since. So the Empire manages to track the rebels down using probes, to which Luke actually spots one of the probes and he wants to go check it out. But immediately after reporting to Han about checking out the probe, he gets jumped by a Wampa, which captures him and kills his poor little Tauntaun. I don't know why I feel bad whenever I see Tauntauns die. So after a couple of hours of not reporting back, Han gets worried about Luke and he decides he's gonna go look for him before they have to close out for the night. And I find this scene really interesting between Luke and Han because if you think about it, if you go back to A New Hope, at least in the beginning, Han wouldn't have done this for Luke. He really didn't really care about anybody but Chewie. So after Luke wakes up at the Wampa's cave, he escapes, cuts off the Wampa's arm, and he takes off. But he doesn't go that far due to the extreme weather and while being injured, so he falls unconscious. But something calls onto him through the Force. And it's none other than his old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Here he tells him that he must go to the Dagobah system and find the legendary Jedi Master, Yoda. And in a way, it's kind of nice to see Alec Guinness back as Obi-Wan Kenobi, same as in Return of the Jedi, because even though he was killed off at the end of A New Hope, I don't know, it's kind of nice to see him that he's still sticking around. He's not fully gone yet, you know? Eventually Han does find Luke, but because it's already too late to go back to the base and they have to shut down for the night, he decides that he's going to use a Wampa's corpse to keep warm Luke for the night. And they don't get rescued till the next morning. Following the next morning, after the rebels realize that they are in fact being traced by the Empire, they decide it's time to evacuate, but not without going without a fight first. And this is where the classic Battle of Hoth takes place between the Rebellion and the Empire and their giant AT-AT walkers. And while all this is going on, Han and Chewie are trying to get the Millennium Falcon fixed because it's having a couple of issues. But they have to get out of there now, along with Leia, R2, and 3PO. So while the group managed to escape on the Millennium Falcon, Luke decided to escape on his X-Wing alone because he's going on a different direction, that being the planet of Dagobah. And don't think they escaped quite easily compared to A New Hope when they escaped Tatooine or the Death Star, because the Falcon is being heavily pursued by TIE fighters sent by Vader himself. And while they try to go into hyperspace, it ends up not happening because it turns out that the hyperdrive is actually damaged. So yeah, they're having a bit of difficulty trying to escape the TIE fighters. So what does Han decide to do? Oh, good old Han. He decides to risk it and go through an asteroid field, and it's actually quite effective as it does take out a couple of TIE fighters, and they manage to escape inside a cave of a giant asteroid. This entire scene is pretty intense but hilarious at the same time because throughout the time C-3PO just does not know when to shut up because he's just freaking out and he's getting on Han's nerves. And he's getting on the audience nerves too. Meanwhile, Luke manages to find the Dagobah system, and when he's landing, he ends up crashing his X-Wing on a swamp. And while he's trying to figure out how to find this Yoda, a mysterious little imp shows up and he starts to troll both Luke and R2 around. He just starts taking their food, he starts arguing with R2. It's a funny little scene. But he happens to know who Yoda is, and he tells Luke that he'll tell him only if he joins him for dinner in his house. So Luke finds out that this little imp is in fact Yoda, and Yoda, he's a little hesitant about training Luke because he's too impatient and he's a little too old to be trained, but eventually he decides he will. So Han and Leia decide that they want to head out of what they thought would be this giant cave, but it turns out that they were inside of a giant worm all this time. Which, by the way, this giant worm kind of reminds me of the worm seen inside Majin Buu at Dragon Ball Z, and it makes sense. Akira Toriyama is in fact a Star Wars fan. Pretty interesting. So Han says that he knows a guy that can repair the Millennium Falcon. His name is Lando Calrissian, and he lives in the planet of Bespin, so they decide they're gonna head off there. So once they get to the Cloud City at Bespin, they're greeted by a kind yet kind of sketchy Lando Calrissian, and he offers to help them out. But it turns out that all of this was just a trap by the Empire as they got to Bespin first. First time viewers of the movie would see Lando as a traitor, but not really. But in reality, he's just protecting his people. I mean, he doesn't like the Empire as much as the next guy, but of course he's gonna take care of his own first. It turns out that all of this is just bait in order to get Luke to Vader. So you could say it's kind of a trap within a trap. So they decide they're gonna keep Han frozen in carbonite, and Boba's gonna take him away. And this is where the classic Han Solo macho scene takes place. I love you. I know. Good old Han. As Luke is going through his training with Yoda, he begins to feel and sense that something bad is about to happen to his friends. And despite Yoda and Obi-Wan's disapproval, Luke decides that he's gonna put off his training on hold and go rescue his friends. But Yoda knows that Luke is in no way ready to face Vader yet. When Luke reaches Bespin, he goes through the corridors and he does briefly encounter Boba and the captured Leia, and he tries going after both of them, but he ends up going into the room where they froze Han. And here is where the classic duel between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader takes place. And it's pretty clear that Vader's just toying with Luke because he is not ready, just like Yoda said that he was not ready to face Vader. It's pretty clear that he was right. He was no way ready to defeat him, and he gets his ass handed to him. While the duel is going on, Lando decides he's going to help Leia and Chewie escape on the Falcon. Because like I said, Lando's not a bad guy. He's just doing what's best for his people. He doesn't want anybody to get hurt. But he was getting fed up with the Empire just coming in and making changes and bossing him around. So that's why he decided to help them out. So back at the climactic duel, Luke and Vader continue to fight. And Vader's telling Luke that he has potential and that he shouldn't join Vader instead so he can complete his training. But Luke continues to defy him. Despite getting his hand chopped off, Luke still continues to deny Vader's offerings to join him because he knows that Darth Vader killed his father, or well, he was led to believe that. But he's given the biggest revelation of his life. Darth Vader is his father. Oh, shit! Screaming and angry in denial, Luke still defies Darth Vader and decides to jump off the shaft instead. And as he's falling to his death, he contacts Leia through the Force. To which Leia decides to turn the Falcon back to rescue him. But how was she able to do this though? How was she able to know and feel that Luke was calling out to her through the Force? Is she Force sensitive? Who knows? So after rescuing Luke, they head back to the Rebel fleet. Luke recovers and he gets a prosthetic hand. Lando takes off on the Falcon. And the film ends with Luke, Leia, and the droids just looking out in the distance in hopes that things will get better. And the movie ends. Like I said earlier, this film's considered to be the fan favorite among many Star Wars fans, and I don't blame them. I can see why they love this film so much. The Empire Strikes Back is a total contrast from A New Hope. Because while A New Hope ended on a high victory for the rebels full of optimism and happiness, this one ends with our characters at their lowest point. The Empire took a toll on them. Han has been taken away. Our main character was given a very conflicting revelation. It's a perfect way to end the film, and it's a perfect way to build anticipation for the next one. Not only that, but we also get to know our characters even more on a deeper level. We can see how dedicated Luke has become towards the rebellion, how frustrated and anxious he is to become a Jedi Knight by training with Yoda. And even though Han Solo won't admit it, he's grown to care for these people. He's grown to care about making a cause to the galaxy. Because despite him saying that he was leaving, he's been around for 3 years and he really hasn't left. I mean, he started off as a smuggler, but now he's a full-time member of the rebellion. And speaking of Han, that goes on to my next point, romance. As far as the romance goes, it's perfect the way they build it up. They make it seem real between Han and Leia. And unlike in the prequels in which the romance felt dry and forced, this one felt real and spontaneous, especially because of the type of characters that Han and Leia are. They're both too proud to show their weaknesses and they won't admit their love for each other. Instead they replace it with arguments. Han calling Leia your highness very sarcastically, Leia calling Han a scruffy looking nerf herder. It's something enjoyable to watch. And when they finally kiss, it's something that the audience feel that it was about time that they did. And while the first film did show Vader and the Empire, they go more in depth about how ruthless Vader can be when he's upset. I mean, he's been after Luke for the past few years, and he knows he's a potential threat, and he still can't get to him. Of course he's gonna be upset. He couldn't stop some kid from destroying the Death Star. He won't stop at nothing to get what he wants. I mean, he doesn't even have remorse for his own subordinates. He kills whoever doesn't follow his orders successfully. In addition, we also get a glimpse of who is the man behind the curtain, the man who's truly behind the Empire, which is none other than the Emperor himself, Palpatine. Again, as far as bad things go, I really can't think of any huge things that bothered me. I mean, one thing that did bother me was how they tried building up a potential romance between Leia and Luke. Because in the beginning of the film, she kisses him, then she kisses Han, and then she kisses again Luke. So it's like, damn, Leia, make up your mind. I also feel they didn't show much of Luke's training. It made it seem like he was only there for just a date, you know? I kind of wish they could have shown more of his training, showing how he's slowly improving and he's slowly becoming a Jedi Knight. Not just a couple of scenes and then, oh, look at the time, gotta go rescue my friends. I understand that it's a movie and you're not gonna have much time to focus on a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not a TV show, but I feel like they could have had a couple of more scenes of him slowly progressing, you know? As far as the changes done to the film, I actually don't have much of a problem with them. I actually do like some of them, like how they changed the scenery in Cloud City or the change of adding Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine. I think those changes were pretty good. And that was my review for The Empire Strikes Back. Definitely a sequel that you should not miss out. Next time we're wrapping up the original trilogy with The Return of the Jedi. Hope you enjoyed my little review. Thank you so much for watching, guys. See you next time.